Why does my lease have a late fee, and are these actually enforced? Hi, I'm Michael Golden with Lease-Review. Today we're talking about late fees in commercial real estate leases. The definition of a late fee is fairly self-explanatory. It's a sum of money that's charged by one party to the other for a failure to promptly pay an expense when due. In commercial real estate leases, this is usually rent and sometimes expense reimbursements from the tenant to the landlord. How much is a standard late fee? Late fees do vary considerably across different commercial real estate leases. Some landlords charge a percentage of the base rent, and some landlords will just use a flat rate to make it easier on themselves if they do have to charge the same amount over and over again. So why does the landlord even charge a late fee? Doesn't this just create an extra profit center for them? We do sometimes forget that landlords have expenses as well, and if the rent payments are late, it can cause them to be late in their payments to vendors likewise. And this can cause a big problem for tenants. A lot of times the landlord as the property owner might be the one receiving the bills for the water and sewer, and if the landlord is late in the payments to the municipality that's in charge of that, they could cut off the water or they could incur additional penalties. So the landlord has to make sure these payments are timely for the entire business park or the entire retail center. And if a tenant is late in these payments, a landlord will eat into their cash reserves, or they'll just have to face some penalties as well. And oftentimes a landlord is making regular loan payments to a bank. And if you've ever seen any of these loan documents, you'll know that late fees are assessed in those documents as well for failure to make timely payments, and interest is charged on top of it. So the late fee is really just a means for the landlord to have something to compensate them if they have to make these payments late as well. And lastly, it does cost the landlord some time and money in assessing these late fees. If the rent payments don't come in on time, the landlord has to use its own personnel and overhead to figure out who hasn't paid, why they haven't paid. They need to make sure that the tenant is aware of that. They need to figure out with enforcement and make sure when they can be promptly paid again. And while this might seem like a relatively nominal cost, it is something that takes time and money for the landlord. Will a landlord ever waive a late fee? As always, it never hurts to ask. There are some landlords who have a zero tolerance policy for this across the board, and that's just to make it easier on themselves. But if you're a tenant who's always paid on time and there was a really good reason for your late payment, maybe your ACH just messed up or your check got lost in the mail, it doesn't hurt to ask because the landlord might waive it as a one-time courtesy. You may notice that your commercial real estate lease contains a recurring late fee. And what this means is that the landlord will charge the tenant a usually larger sum for the primary late fee, say something like 5% of the base rent. And then until the rent and all late fees have been paid, a recurring charge will occur that's usually a smaller percentage of the original late fee. And this is something that we do actually recommend to all of our landlords to insert into all of their commercial real estate leases for the following reason. Once a tenant incurs the late fee, and if that's the only late fee that they will incur, they're really not encouraged to go ahead and pay that amount if there are no further charges that they're going to be responsible for. And if the landlord is making regular loan payments to the bank, they are subject to additional fees and interest, and so a recurring late fee will better compensate the landlord for the charges that they're incurring if they're not able to make timely payments as well. Late fees are not necessarily meant to penalize tenants or for the landlord to wag their finger at the tenant for not making a payment when due. They're really just a way for landlords to be properly compensated and reimbursed for late fees they may incur if they're forced to make late payments on different expenses as well. Most leases do have a clause about late fees and should not be any concern for tenants. If you'd like for us to review your commercial real estate lease, please visit us at lease-review.com. Happy lease reviewing.